And? To screw it up less next time, although we can't possibly screw it up as badly as the city is screwing this up. With a spiffy new intro video. And welcome to This Week at Worcester Podcast. I am Tom Marino. I am the editor of This Week at Worcester. I'm here with my partner in the Gab, Mr. John Edward Keogh. He is executive producer of Manny J Media. He is president of Hollywood Film Group. He is also a contributor to This Week in Worcester. Hello, Mr. Keogh.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I don't know. It was a weird couple weeks. Couple things happened.
Yeah, strange happenings in the universe.
In the Worcester universe.
Yeah, in the Worcesterverse. That's like a new version of the multiverse, the Worcesterverse. No.
What? So we're generally going to talk about Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday this week. Tuesday was the city council meeting with a whole bunch of police union unity showed, and a bunch of fiery public comments and an interesting city council meeting that followed. And then Wednesday was, of course, the community meeting with the Department of Justice related to their report. And then Friday we had a special city council meeting at noon.
Special. It was very heavily attended. Huge amount of people turned out for Friday. Massive.
Yes. Yeah. I think there was more people in the gallery, and that was 3. It was 5, which is far more than the number of councilors that showed up, so that was good. Although they did attend virtually, and that is 120% illegal. I mean, legal. That is completely legal since the COVID days. And look, if you can't be there but you want to vote, I'm not against it. Some people get all pissy, frankly, when people are reporting in virtually, and I am not one of those people. I think it's wonderful. So I thought
we're doing this virtually. So, I mean,
facts.
It would be messed up if you were against it.
It kind of would be, wouldn't it?
It would be. Now we get to analyze the things that happened during the week. Sorry.
So I would. I just pulled one video. There was a bunch of amazing public comments by, activists and just people in the community concerned about this report and what was contained in it. But I pulled out that I thought we should spend some time with. 3 minutes and 30 seconds for a 2-minute time slot. I wonder why this person got extra time. This is Mr. Thomas Duffy II, who is the president of the local patrolmen's union. There's 2 unions in which to represent police. One is patrolmen, one is officials, which is sergeants and up, basically. Sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. This gentleman is the elected president of the patrolmen's union. Let's take a quick listen to what he had to say.
Names to your residents.
Good evening. I'm here to speak on Agenda 7W. My name is Thomas P. Duffy II. I'm a lifelong resident of Worcester, born and raised on Grafton Hill. I've been a member of the Worcester Police Department for 27 years. As a proud president of Local 911, it is my privilege to speak to you tonight on behalf of the Worcester police officers. The report submitted by the DOJ is a reflection of the person that brought this investigation to our city, a total disgrace. Over the course of recent years, society has disparaged the profession of police in this country to an alarming level.
Twitter.
We have local elected officials and some in our community who prioritize disparaging the great men and women of this police department on a routine basis. Being a police officer is an extremely difficult job, and that, along with the disrespectful treatment of the police in our society, is one of the biggest reasons that we have such difficulty recruiting and retaining officers in our city. Let me remind you that some thought defunding the police was also a benefit to the community. That being said, this sham of a so-called investigation is a new low point, with hardly any factual information. The authors take it upon themselves to decide when an allegation gets is credible. How have we come to a point in our city where this is allowed to happen? It's disgraceful and insulting.
All right, we're going to abandon ship. Not sure what's going on there, so I'm seeing it skip and whatnot. I'm not sure. It must have been encoding error on my end. But he did, so apologies for that. But he did say a few things. Certain councilors love to disparage police was one. Another was that these claims are from one individual, especially related to the sexual assault claims. That was all.
That's an interesting statement by him. One individual.
One individual whom he then went and called despicable. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And of course, every single cop is the greatest human being that's ever lived. They are descendants direct from Jesus and never make an error. Never mind do anything bad. No, you hate cops. You're a cop hater if you say that. But they're all perfect. You just ask them, I'll tell you.
Perfect.
So I don't even. It's stunning. It's the whole response to this. I would describe it as, Tony's trying to find out, trying to find how he can get to one of the jurors in Junior's trial. It's like straight out of The Sopranos, just screaming at the top of their lungs, "We're coming for you, people that gave this information. We're coming for you. We're coming for you."
Yeah, I think that there was an element of that, but I think even more that, at least this is just my analysis, is that they were telling the city council that they were coming for them.
Yep.
If you want to receive the endorsement of the unions and all the votes and all the organizing, particularly when Mr. Duffy's wife also testified later on, it really struck me as them, and she's a known organizer of voting and get out and all that kind of stuff, all kinds of different things. They were telling the city council, and they were actually going after some specific city councils. I think, I don't know that it was directed at Attell and and Christian King, and even to a lesser extent George Russell or Jenny. I think that it was targeting a particular group of councilors to let them know, you better hold the line, and if you don't hold the line, there'll be us to pay kind of stuff. So I definitely felt that that push, and his particular. I felt when he testified, one of the things that really struck me was that the tone really shifted when he testified. I think before that there was like some meeting nervousness and that kind of stuff, and there's a couple of people before him and a couple of cops, but when he went to the podium, then his applause that he received was it extended for a long period of time. I noticed that Mayor Petty gave him almost I think it was 5 minutes and change. It didn't ask him.
That was about 3. I cut 3:26.
3:26. So a little extra time there for him. And then I couldn't help but notice that there was an extended period of clapping. I know that Bill Shaner did a really good job covering this particular thing. There was a big round of applause for him in the city council chamber, but then when he went onto the hallway, there was like a second extended period of loud clapping and hollering, which of course, shouted down the person that was at the microphone at that time, who wasn't a police officer. I noticed that behavior. I noticed that behavior was, behavior that was rejected by the city council just a few weeks ago, when people were protesting for the ceasefire, and there wasn't the same response for the police officers doing the same kind of thing. I've also noticed, again on Facebook and in Worcester, Reddit, and all these other places where people go to just say things. All these stories are coming out about the things that people who were victims and advocates were saying to the police officers. But this becomes really hard for them to get away with, because there was dozens of us in the hallway, and never did I hear any of the things that are now like percolating out that were directed at the police. There was definitely some confrontation. There was definitely some people chanting shame at him in particular, shame on you and that kind of stuff. But what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with getting?
No, I mean, well, according to Mr. Duffy, everything in the report is a lie.
Even though there's stuff in the report that the city has already lost lawsuits for. So is he saying that those lawsuits were like those juries were, all set up, even though they were independent of each other, juries, judges, and civil cases? And it's not like the city has ever like just settled. It's always the city has 100% defended the police department basically through every single legal issue there's been, and then goes to court, loses, and then there's settlement sometimes. But even after the first loss, there's often appeals and next steps.
Well,
and
so there's been a bunch of cases that they settled out of court before it got that far, including the beer garden case, which is in the report.
Which is so that one's false. The one that we have the video of the pastor being tased.
Yep. No. See, because I think that's really like all this being upset. There's a lot of crying, really, a lot of whining from the police, from the especially that police unit, that they're being targeted and they're basically, we're the victim here. Is basically what they said.
So there's a thought process that I'm really confused by. So Mayor Petty was on Manny's show on Friday, and he said something that really struck me, and I've heard it kind of, through all the different officials. But we were talking about the pastor's case, and Mayor Petty said that the officer in that case did what he was trained to do, and it really, really struck me. As
he did.
Yeah, he did. You go back to Manny's show, and you can see that when Manny brings up the pastor being tased.
So, which class is it at the academy that's called beating up a pastor in front of his kids in his own church for saying a word?
Well, but not only that, though. Where is it in the academy that when someone flees, right, that has just called you a tyrant? He hasn't done anything. He's never struck you. He fled from your approach into a doorway, that you enter the doorway and chase him down from behind and tase him multiple times. A person who did not present a weapon, did not present a physical threat,
and didn't break any laws.
Yeah, it didn't break any laws. But just because, and in the video, the officer clearly says, basically, you're going to be arrested for calling him a name, and he did. He called him a tyrant, and the pastor, to his credit, admitted being belligerent and calling him a tyrant. The pastor was very. I've watched multiple interviews now with him, and read the written interviews, and even in the police report itself, he admits that he was belligerent and upset. But being belligerent on a sidewalk is not an arrestable offense, right? He wasn't being dangerous, like he wasn't swinging his arms, he wasn't threatening anybody. He was upset about the police officer's actions.
And understand that whole situation starts with the officer showing up at the scene and just barking an order at that man to go inside, which there wasn't even a crime going on. So there was basically his opinion. It was the officer's opinion. Go inside. The guy went, I'm just standing here. And then as he realized what just happened, he gets angry and goes, don't tell me what to do, tyrant.
Yeah.
And so, apparently, but this must be Mr. Duffy said this a few times now. The dangers of modern policing. I guess we don't understand that when the Worcester Police Department shows up at the scene, it's very important that they be able to suspend your First Amendment rights at their whim, because we don't understand the dangers of modern policing.
Right. There's a tone. I mean, this is not just unique to Worcester. There's this idea, this concept in policing, in modern policing, that when a police officer speaks, you're just automatically supposed to listen to everything that they say and do and obey. The problem is that your rights don't go out the door the minute someone with a badge shows up.
And you can very easily Google this, how many times that order to do something has come with a zipper opening. So just do everything they tell you to do. Just do everything they tell you to do.
And that's
that to be clear, those reports have not come from Worcester.
Right. Other. No, but so I mean it's just a tough thing because we have to go over this stuff and read this stuff. It's really hard to process. Again, I keep reading this report, 41 pages. I've probably read it about 7 times through now, and going parsing through sentences because I'm trying to find like I'm trying to think from the perspective of this group that's defending this behavior, and I just can't find the extrapolation that they've made that the account at least 4 times in the 41-page summary it says that the majority of Worcester police officers do a tremendous job 4 different times.
But because that's true, we should apparently ignore the rest, or the rest didn't happen, or it's all from one person, or the baloney being thrown against the wall to see what sticks here is pretty palpable.
It just I'm so again, I wrote my opinion piece for you earlier this week, and I just can't find anywhere other than the lawyer who responded for the city who made this statement that it was completely running every police officer under the bus, and that public statement led to all of this expression of angst and anger and upsetness. And then of course I really think the city council meeting the first Tuesday really exacerbated the situation by not allowing the city councilors to talk about it under suspension at the end of the night, right? And then that led to this just week of rampant people just making stuff up. I mean, making stuff up. And it's interesting because some of the stuff that you and I reported, like for example, about the 90-day, the secondary report, the 90 days. So, we reported that, and then you spoke about it at the city council, and so we have to clarify that this is the difference between a non-responsible journalist and a responsible journalist. So, in speaking with the same sources, there's a negotiated report that goes only to the city later on in this process, and normally it's 90 days. There's not a specific rule that says 90 days, but there's some period of time. And the city manager on the Wednesday, that the same day of the Department of Justice meeting, had a meeting with his attorney with the Department of Justice, and they began this process of negotiating whatever it is that's going to result from this report, right? Some cities, that negotiation has led to further action, consent decrees and other things, and in some cases there's a negotiated settlement of the issues. And then Mayor Petty he made a motion for a report from the city manager that kind of outlines that process, going over each of the 19 recommendations that or conclusions that the Department of Justice made, right? So, I mean, you and I have, at least this is just me. We've done this. We've had a lot of stories thrown our way. There's actually 2 really explosive stories that sources gave us that we didn't report because I don't have any other sources to back it up. I just have one person telling me a story, and the story's really juicy, but I can't report it unless I have a name, right? Or I have like a backup piece of information. The information that we have reported so far has come from multiple sources across a bunch of places, right? Like, for example, you and I reported about the timeline of the investigation. And every investigation that they've done like this in the past, generally speaking, this report is issued 12 to 18 months after the initiation of the investigation. In some cases, it's been a little bit longer, but this timeline where the report came out, there's no evidence to say that it was rushed, or one person online said they threw it together at the last second.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Things like that. So those those events, those thought processes that I've seen, is some people just literally make things up, whereas you and I, and I also have to give Bill Shaner over and Chris Robars over at Worcester Sucks, because I've been listening to everybody's coverage. They've also done a really good job, and they're reporting even deeper and darker stuff about Mr. Duffy, and it's been sourced incredibly well. So I mean, these accusations, I guess, against us as a group of journalists is really interesting because you don't hear them talking about the TNG reporter like that, right? And he's reporting the same things we are, just from a different perspective, right? But still the same details. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of us are just regular people, and some of us have fathers who are captains in the state police that show up when we're in accidents, and we remarkably don't have to blow into a breathalyzer. So, some of us have opportunities, others don't. But the kind of some want to disparage the police all the time. I mean, then pay your own lawsuits. How about that? How about do anything differently? Just do anything. And I don't even expect that. That's ridiculous. That's a kind of a sarcastic response. But it just seems like what we want is to not do anything. What especially that union wants is to not do anything differently at all. And you can understand that because if you actually read the report, which I'm not sure that some folks did, it really says, here's some of the things that we plausibly believe. Right. These are credible accusations, credible stories that we heard, but that's not the point of the report. The point of the report is what they said was, you don't know about these things, and nor could you. I'm paraphrasing in my words. You don't know these things, nor could you, because your supervisory structures don't exist or are broken. And even if somebody complains, you go to an internal investigation. That's a clown show. And he mentioned that we have more oversight than any other profession. We have BOPS, which does absolutely nothing and is wholly useless. You read some of these reports and the leaps to judgment. I mean, the leaps in logic, and they'll play around with the standard of evidence, right? They're supposed to operate on a preponderance of evidence, just like any civil court. And I remember reading one that said, well, we can't really know if this happened. We can't like absolute truth was the standard all of a sudden. Never mind the absolute stupidity of just the beer garden report, which is just like they actually lay out all the evidence. They laid out very clearly the officer blatantly lied, and then you just get to the bottom, and the conclusion is, we violated the dog policy, but this wasn't excessive use of force. Right. They're just ridiculous. They're absolutely ridiculous. And the report also finds that, for example, when a complainant, as is common in sexual assault cases, a complainant will not report at all, but in these cases reported and then decided that they didn't want to participate in the internal investigation any longer. And BOPS just couldn't wait to stamp that thing as closed. Rather, especially in circumstances where there was other evidence they could have pursued to try and figure out if this actually happened. But they're there adjudicating claims like they're trying to build a case to go to court rather than trying to uncover bad cops because they don't want to.
Yeah, there's some things that I feel like there's a lot of distraction in this media approach that they've taken.
Absolutely.
Like they're getting upset over here and trying to get people to pay attention, but not, don't look at these other things. One of the things that almost is completely overlooked is the racial disparity in traffic stops. And then also the racial disparity in arrests for, misdemeanors and lower level crime, which, by the way, was in the city's own racial equity audit that was done earlier this year, that was authorized and done, and the chief of police, that's currently chief of police, agreed with the findings publicly, and so did the union chiefs for the most part. They disagreed with some parts, but they agreed that there was work needed. So the racial component of the DOJ report basically mirrors the equity audit, and yet we had the union heads now saying that the report is baseless. So the whole report is baseless, or are you saying just this one section is baseless? Because it seems to be they're hyper focused on the rape and the allegations of sexual contact with folks that are sex workers, but they're not wanting to talk about the fact that they pull 80% Hispanic people over more than white people, or 60% African American people over more, and those numbers are astronomical. We want to ignore that. So the report is not just this one thing. It was a really broad, investigation. And so why are we looking at race for crimes? Well, the thing isn't about whether we're looking at race for crimes. The thing is about whether or not there's a pattern of targeting one group of people more than another. And the data is a blind study. In this particular case, it was just all the traffic stops that were done in the city of Worcester from 2017 to 2022. And in those traffic stops, who was pulled over? And so the numbers are astronomically large compared to the actual makeup of the racial structure within the city of Worcester, right? So there isn't 80% Hispanic people in the city, but 80% more than white folks, Hispanic people were pulled over. That's a significant number. It's not within the margin of error. It's way over the top. And so it points to something, training, biases, maybe, whatever. There's a lot of different things we can talk about, but that's something they agreed to. The point is they agreed to it in the racial equity audit just a few months ago done by the city. But now the union heads all basically to a man, Rick Cipro, Anthony Petroni, and Thomas Duffy all said at the meeting that that the report entirely was baseless. And that's a big issue in messaging, right? They're trying to distract you from the thing. More crimes are happening in the neighborhoods. The majority of people of color, the numbers are going to be high. Oh man, there's a huge.
So, yeah, I mean that's a whole thing. Well, I'll just say that to this because this can balloon into its own topic.
Yeah, we don't want to go.
We're not talking about response to, we're not talking about somebody calls and crimes being committed. We're talking about people being pulled over.
Yeah, we're talking about the people being pulled over. What we're talking about is that at the city council meeting last Tuesday, all three union chiefs got up and said that this report was completely 100% untrue. Yet they agreed to the specific findings about racial inequity just a few months ago when the city did a racial equity audit by an outside firm. So you can't agree with the findings earlier this year and then disagree with the findings later this year and say that the report is baseless. You have contradicted yourself. So either you were lying then or you're lying now. It doesn't.
And that's really the part. That's really the part that turns me absolutely red inside. Is by the 12. That's about that really turns me on. Turns me red. Is that the whole thing is baseless? Really? Because I swear, I saw a violent criminal thug chase a pastor through his own church and beat him up in front of his kids on video. I also saw a violent criminal thug holding a dog grab a kid from behind because he had the audacity to ask a different cop a question. And so this violent criminal thug grabbed him from behind, whipped him into his dog so he'd be attacked by the dog, and then arrested him. And then that was a very difficult, I will be the first to admit, it was a very difficult situation at the beer garden that night. Cops in the middle of a bunch of fights, and I'm sure that everybody was, adrenaline to the max. But then that violent criminal thug pressed charges for assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and a bunch of stuff that didn't happen. The only reason we
need to go to the city meetings. This is just a troll. This is a troll, Tom. Just ignore him. Now I ignore him going forward. We need to go to the meetings.
Yeah, we were at both of the meetings, brother.
It doesn't matter.
We were there Friday with three other people.
No profile picture. They're just being a troll. It's fine.
But I can understand that was a terrific, horrific situation at the beer garden that night. But then he charged that kid with crimes that he never committed. Yeah. This person that was involved, this violent criminal thug attacked, had nothing to do with the fighting at the beer garden. He was just walking home.
Filing a false police report is a crime.
Yes, misdemeanor.
So not only was he not arrested for that, because they will never generally speaking, arrest a cop for filing a false police report.
Unless he's 30 and black.
But exactly, unless he's Bill Gardner, pretty much. And then, they will go after him and him alone. And so then, but the rest of the stuff that's really important to look at is that he was never disciplined at all. He was never even sent home for the day. Right. And so
they found him responsible for something to do with one of the policies related to handling dogs, and he was taken off the dog team. That was his big punishment.
He never lost a minute of pay. So he moved out the dog team. So maybe that has an extra salary benefit. So maybe he lost the extra salary benefit. Maybe that's what
could
that
be. Is. What he should have been is fired.
But by the way, we don't know that because there's no data for that, right? We don't know that. That's because during this period of time, maybe during Chief Saucier's run, since he's been the interim chief, they've collected more data. But in the period of time that they were viewing, they don't have the information to find out whether or not that led to like a reduction in pay, because the police refuse to answer any questions related to the incident, right? And so that's a big thing. Like, you know what I mean? That's a big thing. That's the thing that we're trying to say, is that these things have base for us to make questions about the police. And it doesn't mean that we're saying all the police are bad. We're saying there's a reason to look into these things to make the police force better. That's the thing at the root of this. There isn't. I understand that in the past, people like to associate this particular investigation like directly with the defund the police movement. I've seen a lot of that online. I don't know that that's what was said, because Project Priceless, I listened to all their testimonies now multiple times. I don't know that any of them said anything about defunding the police. They said they wanted the people who committed crimes arrested, and then they said they wanted the police to be better. So people who are associating with this other movement, which may or may not have merit, are making a mistake, because they didn't actually listen to the women who spoke at the microphone, women and men, and who spoke that night. They weren't making that call. They weren't saying every single cop was a person. One of the ladies said, my abuser. She was talking about one person. She didn't say all abusers. She said my abuser. And so this idea is by this big perspective. We're going to generalize this stuff and then attack it. But we're not going to deal with the individual personal details that these women and men have suffered abuse and are trying to find justice in a system where, when they do report it to the police, and this really gets at what Mr. Duffy was saying when he was attacking one person in particular, he was basically saying this person, they everything they said was made up, except when they were filing police reports, those police reports went missing. They weren't ever filed. People didn't write anything down. And my question to you and to the audience out there, anybody who's asking this question, if I were to make an accusation, me against Tom, of some kind of weird touching, and I went to the police station, I said, Tom touched me weird, what would they do? Well, they'd have to investigate it, because it's the law to investigate those kind of crimes, and they have to take it seriously. And so then they would take that report, and they would have to interview Tom and find out if there was any merit to it. Because, by the way, if you file a false report in that situation, you should be investigated as well, right? So if I was lying, they would have to look into that. But in this case, when someone went to the police department and said, hey, someone touched me funny, the bops and the supervisors and other people said, nah, there's no merit to it. We're not even going to look into it. There's in the report, there are dozens, literally dozens of police reports you can get yourself. You can go on the police website and you can get it printed out yourself, where they were filed without any interviews. So someone brought an accusation, and then the determination of the supervising investigator was, we're not even going to investigate this. So to me, now the reason I'm saying this,
but apparently that's acceptable, because if we go out and talk to people, we'll hear that they're happy or something. So that's acceptable.
I'm just going to pretend for a minute John was chief of police. I'm chief of police for the day. My policy would be, anybody who comes to the police and says, hey, someone did X to me, I'm going to at least interview and find out if there's any merit. I'm not going to ever make the decision to not interview. And it's really weird, because all the non-interviews, I shouldn't say all, but the vast majority of non-interviews happen to involve police officers. That's weird. That's a pattern.
I mean, officers for internal investigations have only had to respond in person. Like, they used to be able to respond in writing.
Right.
And that was only 4 or 5 years ago that they changed that.
And so, and then I thought, again, the city manager made a point also on Mandy's show on Friday, when he said, well, sometimes people get upset and they're remembering things that have happened years ago. And then so the passion and the upsetness related to the years ago thing, is being applied to the current day thing, right? But in this particular case, you have people who are never investigated, not like, oh, it happened 20 years ago. There was a result, there was a case, it was found not guilty, and then the person's bringing it back up 20 years later. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about cases that were never investigated. So there's no way really to know if there's evidence because the police made an active decision not to investigate. So that's a real neat, again, we've talked about this now for 3 weeks running. It's a really neat trick to say, where's the evidence when you didn't investigate the case?
Yep.
That's a really, really neat trick, man. You didn't even go out on a call. You didn't even talk to the person, beyond to find out if they're credible or not. Let's say someone comes up and says, do you at least investigate their credibility, that they may or may not be a credible witness? They didn't even do those basic levels of investigation. So even if those folks were making it up, it looks bad on the police for not investigating it. And, does that make me a bad guy by saying that?
Well, and even when they investigate, they spike the investigation basically.
Yeah,
most of the time.
It's just
so, and the message that sends, Henry, is that the worst of them, right? The 500 and some cops, right? Whatever percentage of them are not great people, because in any group of 500 and some people, you're going to have some scumbags. That's just the nature of human beings. And what they tell us all the time after time after time, is the worst of them is more important than any of us. So they're basically saying, we hate you. And when they tell us they hate us over and over, we start to hate them back. And when we hate them back, they cry like they're victims. Right. So how about, I don't know, maybe the worst of you isn't more important than everyone else because you have a weird little cult going on?
Well, I mean, that's something that, I have a common criticism of modern government in the United States, and this is the expert. Experts are better, people with experience are better, people in a role are better, and regular people just don't know what they're talking about, so we shouldn't listen to them. Their experience have no value, and that's silly, right? In fact, our city manager, in his apology on Tuesday night, said that he relied on the expertise of this lawyer. He said, in his expertise and advice, I took his advice and I made the decision to go forward with that statement, the statement that kind of led to much of the angst. Yep. And in that case, I believe that's because he comes from a school of thought at Augustus, Michael Bryan before him, and all those, versions of the city council that happened in those, 25-year period, right? That believes that, experts and experienced people within government functions are smarter than regular people and therefore should be listened to. Even though this lawyer has a massive conflict of interest in that he's running for the position of the guy who wrote the report while he's representing the subject of the report. That's really bad. Like it's like so bad. Yeah. There's so many layers to the recusal and unethical status of it that to me it makes it disqualifying for him to be the person who gives you the advice. But there's no one else in the rooms. Right, we know that because we also know that it was the only people in the room were Mayor Petty and the manager Batista, this lawyer, that made this decision. And I don't know if they were ever in the room together either. I don't want to say that because if I say that, then people will be like, "How do you know he was in the room?" But we do know from their public statements that they either met or exchanged information over the course of that weekend that led to the approval of this statement. And the city manager took full responsibility for its release. He said, "I was the final decision," and the other councilors didn't know about it. Which, by the way, I would at least given other councilors the spot to run cover for me. You know what I mean? Let me get a vote from you guys or something to say, well, I released it at the advice of the city council. You know what I mean? I thought Councilor Russell made a really good point. He was like, this, he was watching the news when he saw that the statement had been released, and then he asked for the full statement and was told no from the city manager's staff and said, how can I not get a released statement that's supposedly speaking for me as an
that's just wholly unacceptable. That's just wholly unacceptable.
I think it also might be illegal. I think that the city manager releasing a public statement to a media entity immediately makes that part of the public discourse. And I don't know that the city councilor asking for a full copy of that shouldn't be given that under our charter. I would really it strains the mind to see how the legal department could say we can give it to the TNG, but we can't give it to the elected representative. That doesn't make any sense.
And city manager said on the floor of council that he had the Department of Justice asked him. He received the report on Friday. I think that's the 6th.
Yeah.
And it was released to the public on the 9th. And he was asked by DOJ not to even indicate that he had the report until it was released publicly. And that was his reasoning for not informing 10 members of city council at least. But then released a statement, so signed off on his statement, but he was hiding behind his attorney, releasing a statement to the Telegram hours before the report came out. So all that stuff can't be true. All that stuff can't be true. There's too many things. There's too many things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've expressed it multiple times, and many people have the media rollout of it just doesn't make any sense. Is the DOJ?
Mr. Ortega, they are not releasing. This is the what information has been released to the public is the information that will be released to the public.
Right, and then anything else goes directly to the city, and then. I mean, based on the city manager's response to Councilor Merrill Carlson, Councilor Merrill Carlson asked when would we get access to that information, any future information, and the city manager said, when I can and if I can. And so there might be redacted information. I don't know. We don't know that answer. We just know the city manager's team met with the DOJ on the same Wednesday that the DOJ had their public hearing or public meeting later that night. We don't know the results of that. He hasn't made a public statement related to it. And his answer to Councilor Merrill Carlson was, if I can and when I can. So we have no concrete information about when, how, what. We don't know.
Yeah, and just, it is possible. We don't, of course, DOJ would, they're never going to comment on this. But it is possible that these investigators that did this investigation, they are civil investigators, not criminal. But they can make referrals back to criminal. So it could be that the criminal side is investigating or intends to investigate and for potential charges. But we'll not know that until the charges come. And
yeah, I mean, if there's so in this case, under this statute, under the pattern and practices statute, when there's a referral, there's only been a grand jury a few times. It's been very rare, and it's always been a secret grand jury. And again, there's rumors and stuff, but again, we can't report that. We can't say we know for sure until we have proof for sure. And so that's the difference, and I mean, I hope the folks that are watching and that engage with This Week in Worcester understand that what we're trying to do is establish a traditional old school journalism. Maybe it wasn't as traditional as old school as I want it to be, but an ethical journalism, which is we just don't want to speculate. I mean, of course we're, that it could be those things, but I don't know. I can't say for sure. And again, we've been approached over the last 3 weeks with all kinds of stories that people have said that are crazy, even way crazier than anything you've ever imagined. Tom knows. I've shared them with Tom, but I can't say it for sure unless I know it. And so,
not obviously not disparaging anyone that's bringing stuff to us. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of that stuff could be, to throw the scent the wrong way. And then we end up looking dumb because we didn't do things the right way.
Yeah, it smells like a setup too. It's like all of a sudden, we broke one story and then, 53 people contact me with all these leads. And it's like, okay. And it's great because I mean, I do have this network of people that I've built up over, a long, 40 plus years of life, right? So I do have generally credible sources, but I'm really picky about what I want to run with, especially when it's anonymous, right? That's always the scary thing. When someone gives you a quote or you can pull stuff from the story or what the statement is, that's one thing. But when someone's saying, well, I don't want to put my name to it, that makes it a lot harder for you to run a story in a newspaper about it.
I remember all the times, but I mean, since we've been doing this, or I've been doing This Week in Worcester, been part of This Week in Worcester since 2017. I can, it's less than one hand for sure. Maybe it's even two that I can think that, we did it last week, but using anonymous sources, I mean, it's very, very rare in this publication.
And in the case of anonymous sources, I know them. right? So the times that we have used in the times that I've worked with you, or when I wrote for Patch, or when I wrote for What's Up Worcester, or just as an independent journalist, the times that I've used anonymous sources, I knew the people directly. So I spoke with them, I saw them with my own eyes, and then I felt comfortable enough to go forward with the story. One of the big ones was when I was writing about the police drone. My anonymous source, and eventually he allowed me to go public with his name, was Chris Williams, who was the owner of the drone company that sold the city of the drones. And then and the reason I was able to go with his name is because I confirmed it with a public records request. And the reason I was able to get that public records request was because I had the specific names and dates from this guy. And when I asked the city for those names, they couldn't deny me because they knew I had the story, right? And then that led to me getting access to the police department to be able to take pictures of the drones and write the story with, quotes from the police department. And so that's the kind of journalism that we're trying to do. I had an anonymous source. He gave me enough information to confirm the story. Then he was willing to go public with his own name attached to it. That's who we want. That's who we want to run with. And then, of course, the city had to admit that they were, doing weird stuff. There's a perfect example, Tom. They were secretly training on the drone from 2016 when, City Manager Augustus said, we're just opening the idea of a drone when the money came up, when they switched it out right before he resigned to take a different job. So it's just interesting to see that the city would push back on behavior that they've already been caught out doing. You know what I mean? It's not like you guys have ever lied to us before, right?
Right. So I just wanted to, this is actually a good question. So it's not a question of moving forward. The DOJ issued its, summary report on its findings. And so now the process is that the city and DOJ will enter into a period of negotiation, which will come up with a, kind of a final plan on what is actually going to be done to address some of these problems. And then, essentially DOJ will take it to court and etch it in stone that the city has to do the things that it's agreed to do. Which I don't expect, because it would be idiotic, but, if the city takes the tack that the unions are asking for and, absolutely no consent decree, then the DOJ will shove it down their throat with a court order. But it usually doesn't come to that, because cities understand that, despite the inefficiency of much of the federal government, the Department of Justice is extraordinarily efficient. And when they say your name, that is usually your bum in a trap.
And, another thing that led significant credence to this report, Tom, is that the city has already adjusted to several of the policy recommendations already. So the chief of police has said, hey, you know what, you're right. We should do these things, and we should. One of the examples is it's a policy now that if there is undercover officers who are interacting with sex workers, that they're not allowed to touch each other over the clothes, right? Which you would think that is obvious, but the chief of police admitted that they were doing that and has eliminated that as a investigatory tool. That was a normal, traditional tool that would allow a woman who is a sex worker to reach down into your area, touch you, to see if you weren't a cop. That was a normal and regular tool. And the chief of police admitted it in his denial of this report, that was a happening thing, and that they had already decided to get rid of that practice during the course of this investigation. So again, back to the union chiefs. You have 3 union chiefs who get up and say this is baseless, but the chief of police is saying, yes, we actually used to do that, but we're not doing that anymore. So then,
and the report makes an interesting point about this, that they use female officers as potentials, as posing as sellers and undercover stuff, and that they have never engaged in this, but yet when it's the opposite, they do. Henry asks about if Trump coming in affects this process. Probably not. It's probably too far down the road here for it to for the brakes to be on it. We did learn that Trump's landing team is in place at at DOJ and at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they did review the report and didn't ask for any, and didn't ask for any changes or redactions or anything, and were fine with it being published. So I imagine that it is too far down the road for this to be reversed. It is true, however, the last Trump administration, they started, I think, one of these, the whole administration, which was less than any time in the last, since this law has been in place since '94.
Right. And at the Wednesday DOJ thing, the lady who was the lead spokesperson for the DOJ, she said the Trump administration didn't participate in this investigation, but they didn't stop them from putting it out, right? That's what she said. That was her version of that same thing that Tom and I had reported. I went back and watched that multiple times to understand what she was saying. So, but basically she said that there was no oversight from the Trump administration. So it wasn't like they had someone who was going to be on the DOJ staff, the political appointee side for the Trump team coming up, but that they also, the people, whoever looked at it, didn't say, hey, well, we want you to do this or stop this or change this. There was nothing like that. And no source no source that I've talked to or that any publication that I've seen has pushed back on that. So that we've been confirmed up and down, including from the city manager in his own apology, kind of, saying that it wasn't rushed, that he knew about it. He confirmed that. He didn't give us a date. I can't say that he gave us a date. So we can't say that he knew about it months in advance. So I can't confirm that because he didn't say that. But he did say that he knew about it through the attorney. So when that was, that's speculation. So Tom and I don't know. We know at least it was Friday the 6th, right? That was the.
By the time the statement came out on Monday, there had already been internal discussion about the date.
We knew that, and that's also confirmed from city sources inside the bill, right? And
Correct.
Tom has his own sources too. Everybody I've spoken to has confirmed that there was some knowledge of this report before they had it. So there was a general understanding that there was something coming for sure. Definitely that, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it was all pretty easy to predict. I mean, I think the average when the Worcester Regional Research Bureau did their report after this was announced a couple of years ago, that they were at 78 investigations over 30 years. I mean, the law was passed in '94. They started doing the first investigation started in '96. I mean, that's what's really infuriating me about all the flailing and whining, crying victim. Is Worcester's been treated no differently than any other city that's been the subject of one of these investigations. I mean, absolutely not differently.
So basically, it amounts to 3 a year, right? In over the course of it, right? 28 years.
I mean, that throws it off though, because Trump only had one, and everybody else had more than that. So
maybe there'll be. I mean, but it's not that much, even with 4 years. So what, it's going to knock it up to 5? I mean, that's not a lot. And we're, just in Massachusetts alone, there's 351 cities and towns, just to give you guys an understanding of it. And so this wouldn't even be a third of Massachusetts cities and towns, right? So it's nothing.
It's actually of the 18,000 law enforcement agencies in this country, it is less than 0.5% of 1%. It's about 0.44%, I think. I remember, if it was correct.
It's very rare. Another thing too, I know there's a lot of police officers who watch this show who have expressed some uncomfortable things to me over the past couple of weeks, and then of course Tom and I have both been hearing a lot of feedback from a lot of people. I would ask you this: if the Department of Justice, regardless of whether you think it's politicized or not, comes along with an investigation, wouldn't you just take a minute and sit back and just think about what has led even to that? Right. So because if you weren't viewed in a certain way, a politicized Department of Justice wouldn't go after you. Right. You know what I mean? It's not like Worcester was picked out of a hat and it was like, we're just going to go after them.
Just not turned.
Right. Because it's not, because by the way, there's Boston and they haven't been investigated. Brockton, they haven't been investigated. Lowell, Fitchburg, Leominster, we can just hit him. Now Springfield was, right. So that was one of the other.
That was one division. It was specifically the narcotics division.
So in Massachusetts history, there's only been 2, right, of the 78 investigations. So only 2 of the 351 cities and towns have ever had this kind of investigation in Massachusetts. You would think you would take that seriously and just take a look at it and say, hey, maybe there's some things we could change or think about. But there's none of that. attitude, except from the
No.
acting chief of police, who has expressed that there's some changes and things that need to happen. And so I just don't understand the level of upsetness from people, and then the threatening tone. As an individual, it just aggravates me to no end, Tom, to no end, the tough guy attitude. And then as soon as you meet the person or see the person in public, they're like, "Hey, how's it going, buddy?" Like that. And it was so it was so much in play on Tuesday. Before everybody, I got there pretty early because I wanted to make sure Manny got a good spot, which he did. He ended up getting right next to the podium. But there was like groups of officers like staring me down because they know what I do. And then but then when they saw that I have a bunch of other police officers come up to me and say hi and greet me by name, give me hugs, right? They were like, "What's going on?" I like blew them, which is probably now they're probably looking at those cops like they're rats or something because they're friends with me, right? They're probably getting like in trouble because they interact with me. But the thing is that that tone, that like tough guy intimidation tone, when did that infect police? Because
Well, or even like, what's the strategy? Like, let's respond to a report that in part says we're overly aggressive with a very aggressive offensive campaign. Like, guys, you're kind of reinforcing the point.
No, but it's just that what's up with that? That's a typical Worcester in Massachusetts, like a towny kind of like approach. It's like, what are you gonna do about it? Like that's how you say hi. The way it's like, "Hey, how's it going, Officer Jones?" And Officer Jones goes, "Ugh," and he flexes on you. It's like, what the hell is that about, dude? I just said hi to you. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, look, there was and I don't have the whole story together about what was said, but there was a girl who said something or other to one of the cops in the hallway, and I don't get to the whole story as of yet, but I mean, it ended up being this is one girl, one female, standing in front of a bunch of cops. And what did they do? They puffed up and walked her down.
So it's interesting, right? It's really interesting that this one, there was this comment made by one girl, apparently, to one of the officers. But I didn't notice any of the things that the officers were saying to them has been reported at all. Right. And so I was in the hallway. I heard what officers were saying. I heard the tone that was being approached. I heard the responses. There was were there people agitating them? There was people calling, saying shame at the officers? Yeah, sure, for sure. That was definitely taking place. But there was like what do they have to be afraid of? There was 200 plus on the officer's side, right? And that's, by the way, that number comes from the officer who was on duty, who has a little clicker, who was counting the amount of people in the room. And he said there was a little bit over 300 people total between upstairs and downstairs, and there was about 200 officers. That comes from the officer on duty. And so, they were outnumbering the folks 2 to 1. So why would you be afraid of what some person says, calls your name? Like, why is that something that you need to then? This is why we're saying you guys are so sensitive. So what if someone calls you a name, and then you have to go to the Reporter or the Telegram and Gazette and said, "She called me a name." Really? What happened to the tough guy stuff? Why aren't you?
It's all
in the face of that. You're not. So that just shows that is infected the police department. And then when we say we want to hold you to a higher standard, you guys run screaming and crying to people. It's crazy. It's crazy. The mayor, the city manager, and the chief of police all reported this story of a traffic stop where a woman got out of her car and told the police officer, that was involved in the traffic stop, that he should be ashamed of himself for supporting rapists. Well, we've heard this reported widely. Yep. And my question is, why did that officer even report that to his supervisor to get it to them? Why did that get out why did it make its way to the chief of police, to the city manager and the mayor? Why is that a newsworthy item? Somebody at a traffic stop called you a name, and you felt so aggrieved by this that you went up the chain of command to make sure, and the chief of police made the decision to put it into the newspaper. Yep. That's what that is. That is oversensitive baby behavior. You guys are babies.
And look, if you're a cop that's trying to do the right thing, right? You're trying to do your job in an honorable way and the way you're supposed to, and all that. Like, God bless you.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, if that was said to that individual, the officer that was said to by whomever that was, if you're one of those people that are trying to do the right thing, it sucks. And if your wife and your family's asking you tough questions, that sucks. And I feel for you, but I just feel for the priest or for the pastor.
Right. I think your mic went out a little bit there. Second, you skipped. Did I lose you? Okay. So Tom's he's back. I think it was because a massive post came in and it jammed you up a little bit. You're getting hit with some comments. Can you talk? Can you hear now?
Yeah. Well, how am I doing? How am I doing?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear. It's a little echoey, but I think it's just because you got hit with a bunch of comments at the same time, all kind of landed. So.
No, I think I have it doesn't matter. I got an issue with a USB driver. I think it keeps quitting on me.
Okay, I can hear you now, so I don't know if everybody else can. Can everybody else hear Tom? Can you guys Tom's audio back? The life of modern media, Zoom-based programming, and what happens when the mic goes out, right? So I just I really I can't help but be really concerned about the future of our country, state, city, when on Tuesday, with all these women, the police's approach has been that every single person is not a credible person. So that means there's a widespread apparent disease of lying, according to the police department. So there were dozens, I mean, I don't have an exact count of people that got up to that mic and talked about being sexually assaulted, and that the police didn't investigate those sexual assaults, whether it was the police that did it or other people. By the way, if you listen to the testimony, it wasn't just about the police. It was also about being sexually assaulted or being physically assaulted, going to the police and having the police ignore their complaints. There was a bunch of those, right? And I didn't see one police officer from chief on down approach any of the people and say, "Hey, can we talk? Hey, let's have a meeting."
It's all lies. It's all lies.
Everybody's a lie. So how is that make any sense? Because again, the goal isn't the goal to protect and serve. So the public exhibition of 200 plus police and their supporters is not to protect and serve. It's to accuse and defend, but not protect and serve. So the people that you protect and serve were present that night, and they all saw you tell them that you wouldn't protect and serve them. Whether they're telling the truth or not doesn't matter, because the starting point should be police protect and serve, but that is not what we saw Tuesday night. And another thing, I've mentioned this several times in a bunch of different capacities. Tom, when was the last time you saw 200 officers in one place? I mean, I can tell you when. There's two times. One is when there's a new academy, right? You see all the officers come out in force. And the second is when there's a funeral, usually for a police officer. Okay. And those two times are when you see officers come out in force. And I should actually say that there's a third occasion when there's someone who hurts a police officer. If you go to court that day, you'll see police usually line the room whenever there's an officer who's been harmed. But you know what? I don't see 200 police officers. I don't see 200 police officers out at Worcester High School sports supporting the kids, the local kids. Maybe there's a few, but I've never seen 200.
I don't know how that's. I don't know how that's even relevant. Just don't beat people up, and when you're scumbags, don't go culty around them. I don't care if you go to the football game. I really don't.
So when do we call them to account for being representative of our city and they don't support the things that are important in the city. And I'm talking about, I'm not even going to ask you to support inner city kids. How about Doherty? Let's say like you support Doherty. When have you seen 200 officers go there? No, you just don't. And that's the thing that really strikes me, as there's no awareness, Tom, no self-thought that, hey, this looks weird that we're doing this and we're not doing these other things. What about when someone dies from a traffic death, Tom? What about, when there's, I don't even see them out together at the 4th of July as a group. Like, you don't see that. It's very weird.
I don't know. This is weird to me. Like, I don't care what they do. Just don't stick up for your scumbags. That's it.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense. I want them to support the community, and they're willing to come out and support themselves, but support the community in the same tone, the same volume that you did on Tuesday. And I just don't know that I see that. That's something that has to change for the trust to be won back by the community. I'm convinced of that. That kind of behavior is just doesn't make any sense.
Do you know anything about this comment in the chat about a post type of thing?
Yeah,
I have not seen that.
I did read Candy's thing. I just figured we weren't going to cover that tonight. That's an upcoming electoral thing. Rob made a post and Candy responded to his post. I haven't read Rob's post, so I didn't want to say anything. I did read Candy's response. I don't know why hers came up first.
Yeah. So sorry, Kara, I don't think we're gonna go there because I didn't even know about it, and I don't think John's read it.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to say anything until I read both posts.
But
it's also an election between the two of them, and so I don't know what's going on. It's already started. So
yeah, I did do because now it's time to look around and see how many people enabled all of this to happen, right? Like, what happened that got us to a federal investigation, for God's sake? Like, why did the federal government have to step in because the city couldn't handle its own business, which is really what happened. I think looking at we've talked about this a lot, the Human Rights Commission that's been shut down, which is really the only place that any oversight of any police stuff happened in public. And, we have a public safety committee that doesn't do anything. And it has had the same chairperson for 9 years now. And, it's never, in that 9 years, it's never taken up anything related to do with discipline, ever. Not a report, not looking at a report from an internal investigation, nothing related to discipline. 1 year they met twice, the whole year. And look, that's Councilor Toomey who's been leading that committee for 9 years, and judging by her reaction to the sight of me on Friday, which was I was dead to her, was the perception I got. Sorry. I mean, I've talked to Councilor Toomey before. They've been, I don't think it's any secret. She and I don't see the world politically the same way, but we've had productive conversations before. It doesn't look like it's going to happen anymore, and that's okay. Because that's just, I mean, if you want to be upset with me about printing the facts, which is the facts are, you've never seen a piece of spending in that committee for the police department requested you didn't like, and you never asked a question about this one. You never asked for a report, nothing.
I mean, to me, it's damning, Tom. I mean, she can be as upset as she wants, but in 9 years, you've never once handled not even one look at anything from the, like one thing from the police, not one time, not even like the public stuff that we've seen videotaped. Isn't the city manager, both current city manager Batista and then before him manager Augustus, didn't both of them take the position that the Human Rights Commission shouldn't be doing this kind of work? And that I don't
remember that being the position of Ed, but of city manager Augustus, but I don't think he ever prevented them from getting information, where this city manager is unfortunately continuing, it appears, to go down that road of you can't have any data on this stuff.
I'm just saying, if the public safety committee is doing it, I mean, that's, I guess, their the kind of thought is like, okay, this is duplicative, right? But it's such a long period of time. In 9 years, you're saying that nothing has ever happened. This is the tone, though. That generally is that there's no mistakes. There's nothing ever to be investigated. The Worcester Police Department is the only police department in the history of the world that has never had anything go wrong and needs no scrutiny or no oversight. And that's the thing. It's like, that makes no sense. And you guys look terrible, but I guess they don't care because they win elections. And that's really what is really the commentary. It's like, I don't have to care because I'm going to get 10,000 votes. Okay. I mean, that's, I kind of wish they would come out and say that, though, right? Like, they would just say, well, I don't care what you say because I'm going to get 10,000 votes. I'm going to be anyways. I don't care about anybody's opinion. Why pretend to care if the reason is I'm just going to stay in power, so it doesn't matter? That's the thing that really strikes me as scary. Again, it just goes back to show you. And then to the people of the city of Worcester who you're voting or not, this is what you vote for. This is the whole point of it. You're supposed to vote for and against these things, and you're supposed to express yourself to your city councils. They do respond, by the way, very much so, to written letters, emails, phone calls, if you are consistent and you're persistent with them, if from constituents. So if you do make yourself a nuisance, they will hear you. And that's really how things get done in the city. So I mean, it is what it is. Get it done, and let's see how people respond. But I don't think she cares, because why should she? She thinks she's going to win anyways. And she probably will. I mean, I don't want to be like raining on anybody's parade. I don't see any chance that Kate Toomey doesn't get reelected.
No, I mean, if past elections are, unless something changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And and just Kara, we will certainly be talking about plenty of election year stuff as that starts to roll out. And yes, I am very. Also, we are both very, very, very acutely aware how close that race was last time around.
Yeah. We also both have good relationships with both folks.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I don't want to. I'm not going to take a position. If you're looking for me to take a position on who should win or who shouldn't win, I'm not going to do that. I don't believe in that as a journalist. I don't think you should do that. I think it affects people's decision making. I don't want to do that. I do think you should express things about specific like policies and stuff, because that's important. But I just don't believe in picking a side. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we haven't. This week, Lister hasn't done endorsements ever, and isn't going to start.
Yeah.
And then I just want to mention real quick. So, I mean, not a ton, I don't think, from the takeaway from the DOJ meeting on Wednesday. They ran the meeting interestingly that they broke it up into 3 groups to try and get ideas from people. I thought they did an okay job. It was informative to some degree. They answered some questions. It was good. But nothing. I mean, nothing rock starish, right? Nothing like, oh my God, that was said. And then Friday, the city council had to have a special meeting. Go ahead.
Before you move on to that, real quick on Wednesday, I did notice who wasn't there.
Oh, that's a fact.
I really noticed, very much so. Now, listen, I understand that maybe some city councils had things already scheduled. It is the holiday season, so I'm not trying to say everybody had to be there. But it really struck me that the city manager wasn't there, that the mayor wasn't there, and that the chief of police wasn't there. That really struck me as like important, because if you're so critical of what's going on, wouldn't you be there to hear the things that you're being critical of? And it really struck me as a bad decision. Again, a bad optics, whatever you want to call it. You should look at that kind of behavior as telling the community something. Because a bunch of the community members that were there Tuesday night were there on Wednesday night. And it was very striking to see that the 3 major leaders here in our city were not present. Also, the 3 union folks, the union heads, I didn't see either of them. I don't know if you saw them. I didn't see either of those 3 gentlemen in the crowd.
No, so, I mean, there was a couple folks that are with the police department that were there in plain clothes, and that's fine, but they're part of the community too.
I didn't see 200.
Yeah, no, I also saw very few elected folks. Um, Councilor Haji was there. Um,
Rob Kennedy.
Robin Kennedy, Sue Mailman from the school committee was there. I think that was the only elected people, if I remember correctly.
Gary Rosen, our homeboy, our G Money Road
Gary,
dog.
well, Gary. Gary's no longer an elected official. I love Gary.
Gotta love
good
the guy.
friend.
Gary's the best, dude. And he always says hi. I asked him if he was going to run again. He's like, I'm almost 80, John. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I said something to him about, I'm 45. I turned 45 last month, and he was like, 45? I wish I could be 75 again.
He's so
I
funny.
love that man. He's great. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
I call him the sage because he is knowledgeable. He might be loud about it, but he's knowledgeable.
Yeah. And by the way, I've also, because I've said this to more than one person about who attended Wednesday. It wasn't every, I guess people who believed the report, not all of them were there either.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it was very striking that the night before there was this huge, massive turnout from city employees, and then the next night it was barely a peep. And it was very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. No, I was a little surprised that, like you said, who wasn't there.
Yeah, it was very striking. Very, very striking. Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. And then, so on Tuesday, during all of that, there was also an item.
Wait, this is the girl with the frog hoodie. I took a picture of you. Yes, the frog hoodie is great. I don't know if is Leanne on here. If you are on here, this is the girl with the frog hoodie. Leanne has a. Oh, wait a second. Hold on 1 second, Tom. I'm sorry. We got distracted by frogs, man. I have a frog hat. Look at this. Look at this, Tom. Mine's not as cool as Leanne's, though. Leanne has the pink eye one. So we're pro frogs over here at Hollywood Film Group.
On Tuesday, the city manager's contract was so it has actually been agreed to, but they needed a kind of a final vote to authorize the mayor to sign it, I guess. Although they say it's very confusing. They say it's been signed already, but I don't know.
So it's a separate ordinance to sign it.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's a salary ordinance that they have to change. Just have to advertise that. But so on Tuesday, Councilor Nguyen, I thought appropriately held that because it was a bad look on that day after the week that the man had as city manager. Just wasn't. It would have been like co-signing it really. So I'm glad that Council Nguyen held it. But then they called a special meeting on Friday, and it's kind of irritating because what would have happened, right? It's not like they would have taken him off the payroll. All they would have done is when they came back on the 7th, they would have had that vote. They would have signed it, post-dated it, and then just paid him, just the difference in his raise, right? Because he would have got his regular pay. And they could have just back paid him, a few bucks. But we couldn't do that. Had to rush in there on Friday and do it. And I was there Friday, and I'll repeat what I said. I'm not saying you need pitchforks, and I'm not saying a public flogging is appropriate, but right. just to do nothing, just like to ignore that he walked in the room and said, "Yeah, well, I couldn't give it to you because DOJ, but I gave it to the media instead," makes no sense, and that shouldn't be acceptable. And then the lawyer statement that was full of either misinformation, things that they should have known 2 years ago, and unquestionably did know 2 years ago, and it was nonsense, and it shouldn't be acceptable. And they wouldn't even let him go like a week without his raise, and then back pay him, just to say we did anything, just do anything.
Yeah, and I made the statement that when I went and I spoke a little bit. I thought it was funny, the comment about public flogging. I turned to you and I made a comment. But anyways, I don't want anybody flogged, by the way. Before people start saying, "Oh my God, John wants people flogged," I don't want anybody flogged.
Pro flogging.
But I'm pro frogging.
Oh God.
And but so the thing that struck me about is that, the mayor was, adamant that we needed to get this done, because as the chair of the committee, he can schedule these meetings, and he got it done, made sure that it happened. And I said it just was a bad look. It looks bad to me that we rush to do these things and then we don't have a conversation. And I'm not trying to deny the city manager's raise. To me, I said it clearly. He took the city council to the woodshed with this negotiation. And he smashed them, and they get what they get, So I have no issue with his raise. That's what he got. And also, Ed Augustus wasn't making chump change. He was making 225, 230 himself. So it's not like a huge difference between him and them. So I get it. The thing that really strikes me, though, is that the city manager, in my opinion, did reveal his ability to negotiate here and negotiate well, at least for himself. And so my expectation is that he better do the same for the contracts that the city has coming up. For example, the cable, the unspoken about spectrum deal, which, I
just don't talk about it anymore.
I wonder about this, I wonder what's going on with that thing. But also, the union contracts, the firefighters union, they're still waiting for their contract, right? They're still out in the thing, the contract with the police department. Is he going to add oversight to that? There's going to, as guaranteed, there's going to be another negotiation with the city employees. I think there's something coming up, in the springtime. There's a bunch of stuff coming up. And of course, then the thing that really struck me, I wish I said it Friday, is how about developers negotiating with developers better deals for the city, right? Because we just watched Madison Properties walk away from the downtown deal that they made with the ballpark, and basically the city had no ability to hold them accountable. There's nothing they can do to get him back. And so I'm hoping that this city manager because this is extended for 3 years, right? That in this time, there's going to be other developments that come along because, Worcester Renaissance and all that, right? You would think that they're going to negotiate better deals, because that is an example of a poorly negotiated deal by the former city manager, because there was no consequences for this developer. They were able to control a property in the heart of downtown, right next to the ballpark, 4 years, and then walk away with it saying, we just don't want to anymore. That's what it amounted to. That was what Madison Properties said. We just don't feel like it anymore. So now the city has to scramble to find someone else to do it, which of course delays those properties being developed for however long, right? It could be years, right? It will be years. It's not going to happen overnight unless, like a Jeff Bezos or someone stepped in. But with the regulatory things that have to happen, it's going to take years. And so to me, I hope he uses those skills for that purpose, because he's going to be our city manager for the next 3 years regardless, right? So it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think he's he's certainly hasn't been A+, but I don't think he's done enough to, I mean, I did say that he's going to go a few times last week. I've softened my position. I just look, lying to the council and lying to the people of the city so egregiously, it's just unacceptable. It's just unacceptable.
I would think he probably thinks that he's not lying.
That's nonsense. That's empirically untrue. That's another lie. I mean, if that's what he says, I mean, I don't know what to tell him about stop lying, because that's another one.
I mean, I think that he thinks that by sharing it with Mayor Petty, he fulfilled his obligations, right? And he didn't have to share it with the rest of the council. He's made that statement in the past where if I share it with one councilor, that's as if I shared it with
that's such a oh, you're gonna set me off now. That's such a nonsense. We don't like one person to represent us. We like 11.
But his positioning that he's taken in this, and the council has not pushed back on this, Tom. That's the thing.
Well, that's so
that's not even the people you would want to push back on this have pushed back on this. I mean, I guess you could say George Russell definitely pushed back on this specific thing, but all he said was that's not right. He didn't say you have an obligation to give us this information. He didn't. He just said that's not right. That's all George said. So George said he was upset about it. He didn't like finding about it in the media. But all he said to the chair was, that's not right. Because he was telling both city manager and Mayor Petty that they didn't share it with them. What's up with that? And then, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, he did a couple protest votes.
Well, George voted against the contract. He was the only one.
Yeah,
But
he's the only one.
he said it wasn't about the performance of the manager; it was about what's in the contract.
Yeah.
So we're 23 minutes and counting over. So I would like to, unless you have something else, I would like to request that we move to the final thing.
Let's move to the final thing. It's the best part of the show, which is, of course, everybody, the hundreds, the thousands of This Week in Worcester fans are just waiting for this moment in time. And that's the time when, at the end of the show, I asked Tom Marino of This Week in Worcester his favorite things. By the way, the theme song, other than the new theme song that you introduced tonight, should be my favorite things from The Sound of Music, which is one of the greatest movies of all time. And anybody who says otherwise is just stupid. And so that's my movie review. I will not do a Christmas thing. We've done a bunch of
I was
Christmas
going to say, you
things.
promised me no more Christmas things.
I did. I promised you no more Christmas. And we've done a lot of food this year. We've done a lot of snacks this year and drinks this year and movie reviews and all that stuff.
You did video games.
Video games. We've done video games, right? We've done a lot of interesting things. And so, you know what, Tom? I'm gonna throw a complete curve to you, and I'm gonna ask you, Tom, what's your favorite band?
Wow, we're on music now.
Music.
Unquestionably, so I have the narrow. I am the worst person to talk music with. 'Cause I listen to like 4 things. I think music is generally bad. I think people's taste in music is generally bad. Unquestionably, the greatest band to ever exist in the history of human civilization is a band called Blood for Blood from Boston, which is a legendary hardcore band. And unquestionably the greatest single act to ever exist ever.
Ever exist ever? Blood
Ever.
for Blood.
It is the most in-your-face, full of hate music you will ever experience in your life if you're unfamiliar with it.
That's interesting. So you're gonna be shocked by my answer to this. What I think the greatest band of all time is. Maybe you won't. Maybe you won't be shocked by me. But I believe that the greatest band of all time, this is in John's pantheon of bands, is A Tribe Called Quest. Tribe Called Quest is
Interesting.
Yes, they are by far my favorite. They, to me, represent the apex of, this intersection between, hip hop and rock and jazz and all these fusions, and of course the lyrical mastery of all of them. Every single member of Tribe Called Quest, but Fife being my favorite by far. Rest in peace, Fife. But anyways, just the unbelievable nature of that band and the influences that it still exhibits today on many of the super, super, super famous producers. It's just unbelievable. I could walk you through the beats and the songs that led to other beats and songs by other great famous artists like Dr. Dre, like Pharrell, like all those things. And then, of course, rock bands that rely on some of that undertone stuff. Would be, and of course, the most famous person from Tribe Called Quest is Busta Rhymes, which is funny because he was in like the second version of the band, and so
yeah.
It doesn't matter.
He also lives in the new school and all that. Yeah.
So it's definitely Tribe Called Quest is definitely my favorite band of all time.
Interesting. I just would instruct everybody to go listen to the album called Outlaw Anthems and get yourself full of hate. It'll be good for you.
I guess I'll put it on I'll put it in my list and start trying to figure out.
Don't be driving at the time. Like you absolutely cannot listen to that for the first time while driving because you will smash into every human being you see intentionally.
Get angry. I don't know if I want to drive while angry. I already don't like driving, and so I don't want to drive while angry. Oh man.
It's probably not most people don't care. It's the greatest things ever been created.
That's great. That's excellent. That's gonna be like the iconic moment of This Week in Worcester of all time. These two bands next to each other. Tom says Blood for Blood, and I say A Tribe Called Quest. There you go.
But it's actually more similar than a lot of things, and let me tell you why. Because both of it is street music.
Yes, absolutely. I've never been a mainstream guy, and I also like, radio stuff is not the greatest. I like to just talk about. I like things that make me think, and Tribe always made me think about things that just well, that's it. Even the fun songs like Left My Wallet and El Segundo, if you don't listen to that song all the way, you will not understand what's happening in that song. It is just a lot of stuff going on. You got to really pay attention to the lyrics of that song.
And you should actually also listen to. They have a bunch of stuff. You should also listen to "Living in Exile," Outlaw Anthems. It is the pinnacle of hate music. Because, as I've said before, I'm the laziest person you know until I get angry at something, and then God help, probably me, because I probably damage myself more than anything when I get angry at something and chase after it. And that is my soundtrack to life. So,
well, we're gonna finish in under 90 minutes this week. How about that?
Yeah, we're gonna get to an hour some here. Do you have anything else, sir?
I do not. I am done. Hopefully done talking about this, but probably not.
No, this isn't going away. This is going right. I feel like this is going to linger right into elections and going to be a big election thing. Next week, we have what? The 29th next week? We'll probably skip next week. It'll be the 29th.
We're not going to do a year-end special?
You want to do like a year countdown or something? I don't care. I'll do it. I won't be doing anything.
Top 10 moments in This Week in Worcester history?
No, we will not do that. Okay, so we're wishy-washy about next week, maybe. We'll have to talk about it offline.
Next week is iffy. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Until then, if not, whenever the next time we do this, we will try to screw it up less next time. And until then, for my partner and Gab, Mr. John Rucchio, This Week in Worcester is out.